Okay, up on stage we're about to have a conversation about how to have difficult conversations, and each presenter will present and then we'll go to a Q&A, as just like before. So here we have Tess Coughlan, Academic Board Member, Quality Accreditation Manager at the Australian Institute of Business, who has also been intimately involved in the communities of practice in the past with TEXA. We have Asha Ramzan. She is the Executive Officer at the Sydney Community Forum, and Professor Albert Haddad, Professor of Higher Education and the Dean of Academic Programs at the University of Divinity. Please welcome. Now, I promised Asha that I would throw to her first to actually kick us off today. So you're welcome to, you can either sit here or you can stand up and speak. It's completely up to you. Yep, okay.
I'm probably the rank outsider here. Sydney Community Forum is a community development, community capacity building organisation in Sydney. And we happen to also have the Study New South Wales funded New South Wales International Student Intake Assessment Referral and Support Service. And the reason that we come to be in that position is because during the pandemic, we led the civil society response to the forgotten people in the pandemic, international students and asylum seekers, but our focus was on international students. We happened to be in direct relationship with international students. Our cleaner was an international student. We had students on placement, social work students, and we found ourselves responding to international students in crisis, on the brink of homelessness, unable to feed themselves. And what became pretty obvious to us really early was, I've known there were problems with international students in terms of a lack of safety net and all of the challenges of being a stranger in a strange country, where your language, your cultural ideas, your strengths, all of those things have a tendency to not have a place, to not know how to actually navigate systems that you don't understand. I came here as an international student, what feels like 100 years ago, as did all my siblings. So anyway, so the Intake Assessment Referral and Support Service is for all of New South Wales. And since the pandemic has finished, what we've been seeing has been really, really complex cases with a failure to engage early on the part of institutions, education institutions. And for us, that's extremely challenging because you're looking at students who've got really serious domestic violence, assault, and homelessness. And there would have been signs somewhere along the line within those institutions that a student was struggling. So obviously the difficult conversations are not happening. I'm going to talk about 3 different cases to just highlight that. So a student from an Indian subcontinent background came here with an arranged marriage, her husband on a spouse visa. Her family believed that she would be safe because she needed the protection of her husband. And she experienced domestic violence from very early in her arrival in this country. Extreme domestic violence, sexual assault, and a whole range of things that we would probably classify as sexual slavery, perhaps even, and exploitation. So she found herself working, trying to study, doing a master's course, and living with the domestic violence. And the only reason that she came to us was because she did a placement within another organisation that's a partner organisation. So my organisation is a member of the Sydney Alliance. It's a civil society coalition of unions, faith-based organisations, NGOs like mine. And so there's a lot of cross placement dialogue. Students who are on placement with one organisation will be working with us as well because we're partnering on an affordable housing campaign, say. So the student asked us a question during an information session about a friend of a friend who was living with something, and would there be help available for this friend of a friend if she was to seek help. And, you know, I'm a trained domestic violence, child sexual assault survivor, sexual assault counsellor, 25 years. Whenever, and I worked with adolescents who were homeless, whenever it's a friend of a friend, you know that it's really just testing you out to see how you'll respond, because it's actually usually that person themselves or someone very close to them. Obviously, we responded in a way that reflected the things that she needed to hear. She was affirmed, validated. The position that we took on it was really clear. This is not okay. This person is experiencing this, naming it. We feel really concerned for their safety, their well-being. There's help available. Please let them know that if they decide to get help, we're here for them. And then we got the intake. So the difficult conversations, I imagine, because she has PTSD, by the way, because of that extreme trauma. And the pandemic was a gift because we were able to get her out and get her into accommodation that was offered by New South Wales government for international students. The one thing that we won through that campaign, which was that there was some affordable housing available, and it was her escape route. Prior to that, she was unable to escape. Now, she was at a university, and I am aware that there must have been missed opportunities. She was struggling with paying fees. She was struggling with her studies, not because she's not bright, but because she just could not cope with the demands that she was facing. And she also had all of the classic things that you would see, absenteeism, having trouble focusing in class, getting distressed about certain content within the class that was discussed. But those cues were not picked up. And my invitation to you is to say that you're missing the cues, because we're getting students who have actually got such entrenched problems that we're dealing with the complexity, intersecting issues. You know, you're looking at threatened loss of their COE. You're looking at a student who's invested so much money, the hopes and dreams of her whole family, her community, and she isn't going to pass. And that's a crime against her humanity. So that's just one case. A recent case is an Iranian student. So my question to you is, what is your duty of care? These international students come from other places. They're rooted in other places. And if you're a first-generation migrant like me, you always are in two places at once. You have deep roots here, I've been here forever, and you have deep roots back home. And you are really immersed in understanding what's happening back home. And so the Iranian students, as well as the Sri Lankan students that we're working with, the institutions could have been really proactive and touch base with them immediately, because a crisis back home is a crisis for them here. And that hasn't happened. And my question is, do you know your demographics? Do you understand what your duty of care is to these students, but also what care looks like? And care looks like acknowledging that there's a crisis back home, asking, are you okay? And also looking to see what can be offered. Sri Lankan students could not get any money here. Their country is in economic crisis. And the students we're working with are privileged students, but their families just do not have the money. I think a student from Sri Lanka told me recently how many Sri Lankan rupees buy $1 Aussie dollar, and I nearly died. It's 50 Indian rupees to $1 Aussie dollar. It's over 100 Nepali rupees to $1 Aussie dollar. So it doesn't matter how rich you are back home, you can't compare apples and oranges. But the student's country is in crisis. Her parents cannot send any money here, and she's unable to pay her fees, and she's a brilliant student. So when you market international education in developing countries as aggressively as you do, and you generate $39 billion worth of revenue, you have a duty of care to those human beings. And if you do it well, you will continue to get that revenue. But if you don't, you will have really contravened the human rights and fundamental duty of care that you have to these human beings. These are human beings. You're not buying widgets. The Iranian student that we recently saw is at a Sandstone University doing a master's. She came here 2.5 months ago, and since then her country has degenerated into basically street warfare. And all the assumptions that she made no longer apply. Her father cannot send the rent from her house to her so she can pay for the exorbitant fees that she needs to pay. She's so desperate, she's saying to her dad, just sell the house. And he's saying, to whom? No one has any money. And she can't go back because she's a young woman who's come here with all the hopes and dreams of escaping the gender persecution in her country. And she'll make a brilliant professional here. She's already got 10 years of experience back home. But she's in crisis. And my question to her was, has the university reached out to you? Have you been able to talk to somebody about what support can be given to you while you try to work out what you can do? By the way, she's babysitting, she's cooking Iranian meals for people, she's working in a job where she's not being paid a basic wage, the minimum wage, because her employer told her, you don't have any experience in this country, so we can't pay you what we would normally pay somebody. So she's earning $20 an hour. One of the things I wanted to point out is that people live their realities, and they're not just a student, they're living a whole life, and they're bringing a whole life with them, and they're also bringing enormous strengths with them. The young people that are coming from overseas are actually amazing. Assume nothing, get informed about their cultural background, understand that you need to ask them. Don't assume that somebody from their own culture will be the right person to talk to them. Our Nepali student just told us, frankly, I do not want to speak to a Nepali person. I will be judged because I found myself in a domestic violence relationship. Although I long to have counseling in my language, I would prefer not to see somebody from my own background. The shame, but also the stigma that will be applied to me as a victim, I don't think I need it. So she preferred, so ask, we always ask, do you prefer to see somebody who speaks your language? Do you prefer to see somebody who is culturally aware, sensitive, respectful, compassionate, skilled, but does not speak your language? What would you prefer? I'm going to stop because I'm probably putting the cat amongst the pigeons here, but some of the things you've talked about today are amazing, but hey, we shouldn't be seeing anybody in crisis if they're doing such an amazing job. And we're seeing people who should have had intervention at the start by somebody who was having a relationship with them at sub-level within their institutions, who actually cared enough to say, are you okay? I am concerned for you. I've noticed. That's all you need to do. You don't need to be an expert on these things. And the other thing for me is that you need to be connected to civil society. Some of the things you've talked about today really alarmed me. Sexual assault is a crime. There's a protocol for dealing with sexual assault. Don't contaminate the evidence. Domestic violence is a crime. If you have conversations that contaminate the evidence, you are cutting a doorway to a prosecution later. You're cutting off the right of that student to have legal justice. And that, for me, has massive implications. So you don't have to be experts, but please do be linked up to all the experts out in civil society. There are many, many institutions working with international students, even though that's not their mandate. Build relationships with them. We've been working closely with the Eve for how many, 2 years, 3 years now? Because we reach out to the institutions. We'll work with anybody, we're shameless, because the outcomes will be amazing for the students. Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you for the important work that you do as well as everyone in your organisation. Okay, so I might pass over to Tess now, if you are happy to speak.
Is this on? Oh, yes. Thank you, everybody. I know we're up to morning tea, so I'm going to keep this real quick. Afternoon tea.
No, that's okay. We've just extended the afternoon tea out a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, but I'll still keep it quick. So in the room, I'm going to acknowledge we have students, and this is for you. I acknowledge we have many people who are here to support students in what they do, and I want to thank you for that. Thank you. I want to speak to one set of stakeholders, though, because many people in their presentations have been speaking about the preventative measures they have and the response measures. I want to talk to governance. There are many people in this room that I recognise from independent providers who are CEOs and who are leaders in their institutions. Now, forgive me if I don't recognise you from the universities, but I know that there are some here from governance in the universities. And Katrina, you talked about the importance of academic governance. I raise you to corporate governance because you people hold the purse strings. You make the decisions about what the priorities are. Now, bless you, Texa, you've made us all choose between 3 priorities this afternoon of cybersecurity, academic integrity and support for student wellbeing. And we can't be in 3 places at once. And I think sometimes that's the decisions that's made by corporate governance, in that we don't have money to go around everything. But for those that are actually in this room, I acknowledge you because you've made a conscious decision that it is important and it is a priority, and thank you very much. For people like us that have to work in this area and do our best for our students on a daily basis, it means a lot when we get your support. Now, my institution, and a bit of history like Glenda, and Albert knows this history as well, because we were in the TEXA, HEPQN, SASH community practice, and we shared everything. And we had a regulator in the room, but we still shared everything because TEXA was very supportive. I cannot thank Dr. Irene Nickvak enough. She was fantastic. Now, back in 2015-16, we had the Respect Now Always change the course. My institution has AQF levels 8, 9, 10. We have working adults. We're in business and management. We have about 2,000 students a term. We have 6 terms, and we have about 40 students in our research higher degree. So everything is online. And at that time, there was a reflection of, well, that's low risk for us because we don't have on campus, and we, you know. But no. That doesn't mean that there are people who are not enrolled with us who've not experienced this or are not experiencing it in their daily lives. And that's the support that we need to make sure that we provide them. It's acknowledging they're real people and they have real worlds. Lisa Bolton talks about the student experience survey, that people will nominate why they were thinking about leaving, and there's always stress. Well, stress comes from a variety of sources, as Glenda recognised. You know, it could be anything. So we're like your institution, Eve. We have a third party. We had an online employee assistance program for our staff. No brainer. We just opened up the licence, paid for all our students to access, no matter where they are in the world. And we get quarterly utilisation reports that show that our students located offshore use it. Our corporate governance just said yes. So there are many decisions like that where our corporate governance have stepped up and said, yes, we support you. Now, I thought a difficult conversation would be with Texa when it came to our registration renewal time, and we handed our submission and we were a little bit wafer thin on our evidence. And Irene was really embracing and really kind and said, look, this is where you need to focus, this is where it is. And then rolled out the guidance note, and we used the appendix in there as a self-assessment. We turn that into a self-assessment, and we use that every year to make sure we stay on top of where we feel we're doing well, but also where we need more support. And we take that to our governing bodies and we say, this is where we want to focus, this is what we're going to need. Can you please put it in the budget? Sometimes yes, they say, sometimes they say no. But we report it, we communicate it, we evaluate, and we keep them always in line of what we are doing and how we assess. They welcome that report. So my last one I'm going to finish up on is, for the people who are in corporate governance, go home, have a look at your agendas. Go have a look, how many times do you actually focus on student support? Have a look where it is in your budget. Have a look how often you are getting reports. Where is this in terms of priority in your institution? And please reach out to us, the people that are doing it on the ground, and have a chat to us about what we need, because it could be a difficult conversation for us going up. But if you come and you speak to us, it's not a difficult conversation.
Thank you very much. I'm always happy to be raised. And governance in general, people, engage with the data, hold yourself to account, have the plans. Over to you.
Thank you. I can't raise the stakes. I think hearing Asha, it's incredible. I'm going to talk about my experience over the last 3 years in another institution rather than Divinity, because in that institution I came across SASH and we needed to up our stakes, so we needed to introduce a number of different elements to our responses. So that's when the difficult conversation started. Started with the CEO, started with the academic board, started with the staff, and with the students. The students did not know what SASH was all about. We had 3,000 international students, and international students don't really like to talk, as we heard. They don't like to talk about things like that. Most of our staff were international as well, so they did not understand what was going on. They heard it, they accepted it, but they did not. So thank you for talking about the different perspectives, and people have different perspectives, and so we needed to actually understand what was going on and what we needed to do. So we again reached out to Irene and helped us with understanding what the process, the procedure, the policies, procedures. We had a policy procedure, but we had to revisit that, and we set up a whole SASH committee made up of a number of different people, and we exactly used the same 5 elements or 6 elements to report to the CEO, to the council on a regular basis, fairly regularly, but we didn't have any incidents. We only had 1 incident in 2.5 years, and we were thinking, what is going on? Is it that there's nothing, or is there? So we started thinking, okay, well, we need to start doing some training. We need to start doing a little bit more training. We need to start putting some more information. We hired 2 student welfare counselors, welfare counselors, because they were not just for the students, but also for the staff. And we started running courses. We started doing other things, and we started looking at around where are there any other courses around that we can use or share. And Fiona, thank you. I might talk with you to see whether your course can be shared across, because we started looking at. We knew about Monash, so now that you're here, we'll talk a bit more. It's important that we share these facilities. We are, as private providers, not only for 100 or 600 or 700, we don't have the resources of the universities. We never have. So why not share the resources together? Because we are, well, this is a society-wide issue. We need to be putting our shoulders together and sharing. So I will go beyond the governance and go to the wider community of higher education and say, it is a wider community issue. It's a universities and non-university issue. So why not actually put it on the table and start sharing across rather than hogging things together? And that's why, because if it is the student and the staff well-being, so that everyone is safe, we need to help each other and support each other in that way, because we're doing the same thing. So, and that's where the conversation, I think the next conversation needs to happen. And I think the community of practice needs to continue. We learned a lot from each other, we shared with each other, and I think it should continue, not only with the private providers, but also across the 43 universities and across the wider sector, so that we are sharing together, we are learning from each other, and we are supporting each other, because it's not just for the universities, it's not just for the private providers, but it is for the students and it is for the staff, because we need to be working together. And if there is a difficult conversation, I think we need to have it among each other, because we are doing the difficult conversations in our own organizations, and I think we need to do it across the organizations.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have Rodney, the roving mic. Please ask the panel a question if you have one.
I'm a very retiring, shy person, so I don't like to use a microphone. Look, it's really to the room. I want to pick up on the comments, the theme that's evolved over 6 speakers today. There's been a call to action. Are we going to act? Is anybody prepared to stand up and say, let's work together? Yep. Let's do it. Why step back? This is for our community. The communities we work in, our students live and work in, it's for our community more broadly. Can you imagine, instead of having to look at best practice overseas at institutions, if institutions overseas turned around and said, best practice is Australia? Not an institution, but tertiary education in Australia. How cool would that be?
And I hope you won't do it in silos.
Yeah, that's right.
Because what strikes me is that the education sector works in silos as well. I'm a bit surprised in one way, but yeah, and so that lack of knowledge and awareness of what actually exists in highly specialised services out in civil society, women's health centres, like we work closely with ACON, with women's health centres, with, you know, legal centres, like the whole landscape of support is what we turn to, because we're a tiny organisation with a mighty kind of, you know, mission to make a difference. And we can't do it alone. We can't change the world alone. So that's why we're a member of the Sydney Alliance, because we lean on the partners. St Vincent de Paul paid a $10,000 debt for an international student for an emergency caesarean. You know, we just went to them and went, you've got to do this. You don't have people making demands on your money right now. Everybody has a safety net. This was in the pandemic, and this student has lost all his work, and his wife has just had an emergency caesarean. They paid it. So you know, there's so much available for the students, particularly international students, who don't have a safety net. But I think you would need to get past some of your shame and your maybe embarrassment or all those things to perhaps put student welfare at the core of what you do. And from our perspective, we actually prefer to work with the institutions and to say there's an alignment here of interest. Our interest is, you know, shared across here, and we'll work with you. And the institutions that we work with, the outcomes are amazing. So, and we're a tiny, like the intake assessment and referral service is one full-time worker, but we actually have a community of people working supporting the students because of our membership of all the networks, because we've been able to call in on the child and maternal health for the unplanned pregnancies, ACON for the highest number of young men getting AIDS, new AIDS diagnosis from Southeast Asia. So those are all about safety and well-being. Young women most at risk of date rape and those things are young women who've never been allowed to date. I come from a community like that. You cannot openly date in my community. So all the dating is done secretly, and you never learn how to negotiate a relationship. And then you find yourself at risk when you find yourself given all the freedom that you get when you come here, and God, is it intoxicating? It's totally intoxicating. But you've never learned the tools and skills to negotiate safe sex and negotiate consensual sexual relationships. You know, these are just the realities of young people. These are young people coming here. And they're having access to some of the things that our young people take for granted. But they don't know what to do with it, and they don't know how to manage it. So you need to have those difficult conversations.
Thank you. Now, I'm just very conscious of the time, and I know that we changed the program up a little bit, but I do want to give somebody else an opportunity to ask a question. I think we have one.
Thank you. Sarah Madison from Swinburne University. In response to Eve's question, certainly within Victoria, all of the higher education institutes, after the National Student Safety Survey, agreed to collaborate. So I suppose it would be interesting for either TEXA or Universities Australia to kind of lead that Australia-wide, because I think we do really need to share our resources and steal from each other, all best practice, which is fantastic. I think I also want to pick up on one comment that Asha made, which is really, really critical. Sexual assault is rape, and we should just call it that. And I don't know why we continue to say this other sort of homogenised or sanitised word, and it's absolutely illegal, so we should really use that language. Thanks.
Good point. That's okay. We'll close off now. But before we do, I just want to say the key themes that have come through from the session so far for me, it's been compassion, leadership, use the data, and there was one other one, but it slipped to my mind. Collaboration, that was it. Yes, so maybe we can work up an accurate or something. Yeah, yeah. So they're the things that have resonated throughout everyone's presentations today. Thank you for your participation to date. We'll have a short break. As we're running a little bit behind, I believe it was a 20-minute break initially. Yes, so we'll be back here at 4:20 for the final sessions. And please thank the panel